Marius, lovely to meet you. Now, you're the director of King of Devil's Island, and when I saw the film, what struck me as what it was about the human spirit and refusing to be broken.
I mean, I think maybe that what made me want to do it was almost the other way around. I met some men who were there in the 30s, 40s, and they had sort of carried the sort of stigma of being a Bastøy boy for so many years. Some of them had not even spoken about it to their, wives, and these were people, men who were in their, 70s and 80s, and they were speaking about some of their experiences for the first time. So that is part of what sort of wanted me to make that film. But then, of course, it becomes a story about people who do not want to bend into the rules of power, because some people actually did make it off the island and make life for themselves after that experience.
The story's based on true events that happened, as you've touched upon, but there must have been plenty of stories that you couldn't actually bring into the screenplay because it was possibly far too brutal. Did you find that as part of your research?
Yeah, I mean, there's two things. I mean, there are elements I found in research and were told in interviews that I felt would be hard to believe, and also push people out of the film. I think you can only push so much brutality and darkness into a film, and the audience will reject it. So you have to sort of make that. It has to be an integrity in what you tell and how you show a universe in a place like that. But some of it has to be hinted upon, and can be stronger because of that. So you make an oppressive atmosphere, but you don't have to show all the punishment and violence as graphically and as brutal as it actually was. Though we show, I think, more than enough.
Now, the interesting thing as well was the casting process. Would you like to tell us a little bit more about the cast, the boys that you did use to be in the film?
Yeah, I mean, we knew that the boys on the island were between 8 and 18, so we would have to go for unexperienced actors or non-actors. And in this case, I needed people who actually looked like they could have lived at that time, and also being sent to a place like that. Most kids in Norway look very different. I mean, you need these kind of timeless faces, and you need someone who carries some of that experience with them, because this is a film where they're not allowed to speak their mind. So a lot of what you see and what you learn about them, you read through their faces and their body language and their eyes. So I had to find kids and casting mostly in outside the bigger cities, smaller towns, special schools, and then of course I searched all over Norway for a better part of a year to find, even in the smaller roles, to find faces that registered and took you into that time and that kind of background. And I actually took them through long casting periods, which was really my training. My rehearsal time with the actors was the process of actually choosing them. So there was, as it came down to like the last 30, 40 boys, we had a lot of improvisation. I took them to camps. They were like on farms where they actually learned to do the work and do the, we improvised around the scenes. We never did the scenes, but we did situations that were similar in emotional content to the scenes they would be playing in the film. So most of the kids, they never actually read the script. I would tell them the scene we would do on that day. They would know about Bastøy, they would know about the institution, but not in detail what the scene was about. So
that makes it fresh and exciting for
yeah,
you.
because you want it to be real, and you can easily dry up with a non-actor. So you balance that because you have them, and then you have Stellan Skargaard on the other hand, who has done 80, 90, 100 films, I don't know. So there was different needs every day, you know.
It's quite challenging for you then, as a director, working with such extremes in experience, really.
Yeah, it's a challenge because a non-actor can do something beautiful and very spontaneous, but if he's tired that day, he might not give you anything. He wants to go to bed and it's cold, and it's so sometimes you really have to force it out, and other times you just have to sort of guide it very carefully, and they will give you something very beautiful that you were not expecting. But it's a balance. I mean, I don't know if Stellan told you that, but when we had the first day of shooting with the governor and Erling coming to his office, that was like the first time they acted together. I mean, we trained a little bit, but when he sort of went into character, Stellan, Benjamin was so intimidated, and he was supposed to be sort of arrogant and in the face of the governor, but every time Stellan said something, he would just nod. And I said, no, you have to be, don't, you know, he doesn't mean anything to you. I mean, you should just ignore him. But he couldn't do it, you know, because he was so, and Stellan is even off camera, he's on, you know. So in the end, I had to ask Stellan to leave the room, and I took his place behind the camera, and then Benjamin could easily be arrogant and nonchalant, you know.
It's amazing the power of somebody like Stellan Skargaard. I mean, he said when I spoke to him before about the film, how long he'd wanted to work with you. So how did that working together? And somebody like him as well, bringing so much complexity and depth to the character that he was playing.
I mean, we sort of agreed that we didn't want like a stock villain for this. We wanted to do him like a whole human being, someone who had a conscience, but he had, and who in his way was maybe quite modern and quite fair, but in many positions of power, at one point, it becomes more important to protect the institution and not the people you are there to protect or help. So it was a story about the structure being the villain, and he was also caught in the structure. But of course, when push comes to shove, he's a hypocrite and he's a coward, but not necessarily an evil man. But with Stellan, you know, he's a very technically adept actor, but he's also an intelligent guy. And I mean, we really agreed on. You need a protagonist. You need someone. You need a heavy. You need someone who is the oppressor. But I want to see his dilemma as well. You know.
I think what was interesting with what he had to say as well, and this says a lot, I would say, for him as an artist, is that how much he learned from working with the actors that had never acted before, and how much truth they brought. You know, he, with all his experience, is still open to learn from novices, really.
Yeah, you got to remember that Stellan Skargaard, he started as an actor at the age of those boys. He was in a TV series when he was like 15 or something like that. So he probably remembers that being fresh before he was trained. And of course, there's something you lose after training. I mean, you can't repeat things, but you can do something that's very honest if you set the situation and you guide people and you cast it right. And what he said was that he had to hide his technique and his tools very carefully, playing with these young boys, because they're not attempting to act. At least that's my job, but they will not attempt to act, but react.
Another strong character is the location. Within the film. I mean, the film is shot beautifully, and it really is cinematically stunning. And I just wondered how important the location was for you to build a blank canvas to then make the film look as cinematic and as dramatic as it is, because the bleakness, you just feel it, don't you, from the screen?
Yeah, I mean, it was all important because, I mean, we were thinking of going to the real Bastøy Island, but it was not possible because there's a prison there with 150 prisoners today, an open prison, but still a prison. So we had to find somewhere else, and we ended up in Estonia, where we found a place that was sort of untouched by time. We were allowed to build certain things and dress certain things. But of course, it was a big choice and a difficult choice because we actually lived on this location for the entire length of the shoot, you know, in the snow, cut off from the rest of society outside our little, you know, camp of actors and crew. So, but I felt it was worth it because it's. You really have to believe, you have to feel the oppression of the island in every frame. And we will always try to have ocean when we're outside, so you can feel the ocean that isolates them from the rest of the world, and you have to feel the cold. I mean, because there's one thing you can feel that you can transmit visually, maybe not hunger, but you can transmit coldness. That's something you can feel. Heat and coldness you can transmit through film. So it's important to sort of get this feeling, that the chill to the bone all the time, which is of course physical but also psychological, because they were abandoned, they were isolated. So, and that is something that seeps in. You might not notice it, but when you watch it, I think you can feel that. And it was like a human coldness that they experienced, and that's what the men I spoke to, they spoke of two things, what they remember the most is they spoke about being cold and hungry.
Is the look and feel of the film, was that done sort of in camera, or did you rely on the grade to give us that kind of dark? There's lots of greens and blues again, emphasising that coldness. No.
All of that starts in camera. It's in how you choose the locations, the colors, in art direction, costumes, skin tones. Because if you try to just make it in post with a colorist, it's going to look like a music video. So I mean, everything you see is really, the choices are made. Those colors are what you choose. And then you balance it in the grade, but you don't try to apply a very strong look, even though it is a very monochrome. It's almost a black and white film in color. The color comes through when you know, when there's fire and there's blood, and you know, this thing comes in. But it is very monochrome, and I wanted it to be. But it starts with the choices you make before the camera rolls, and you don't try to twist it too much in post away from what you have. You just make it fit together, because it can very quickly become artificial if you just apply a look on a film too strongly, and that makes sort of a distance from the characters and the audience. Yeah, so it has to sort of feel organic to what is there.
The other thing that felt very organic was the music and the minimalism. Can you tell us just a little bit more about that? Because there aren't great big strings, that the instruments, it all seems very minimalist that were used.
Yeah, I mean, you could easily go overboard. I mean, at points, it is strengths and it is quite strong, but I think it's just balanced so much so it doesn't get too intrusive, because again, I think if it was too strong, it will push you out of the film and the style of the film, of the storytelling and the acting. It's not, it is to be a film about a riot. It is quite told with a whisper until a certain way into the film, because it was a place where you didn't get to voice your opinion, you didn't get to speak without asking permission. So you had to sort of balance that. But I did want an emotional, dramatic score, but it couldn't. You always felt that when Johan went too big, I said it doesn't fit. It remains outside the picture. It has to go into the image and not stay on the outside. And I think in the end he just managed to nail that. So, But I wanted it to be sort of like an old school dramatic score, but not a huge Hollywood thing that to me would be an artifact in this film.
Thank you very much indeed, Marius.